Hi everyone, my name is Dinh. I am an assistant professor in the speech language pathology program at the University of Toledo in Ohio, not the Toledo in Spain, unfortunately. I want to welcome you to my presentation entitled Employing Social-Emotional Selectivity Theory to explore the usage and role of communication technology among older adults with aphasia. The content of this presentation stems from a paper that I wrote with Dr. Julie Brown that was published in December last year. To begin my presentation, I wanted to share with you the motivation of this presentation or this topic or even this paper. I am a speech language pathologist first, then a gerontologist. Even though many speech language pathologists work with older adults, most of us, at least in the US, don't receive a lot of training in gerontology. It was not until my doctorate journey that I was introduced to gerontology through Dr. Julie Brown, who later became my dissertation advisor and now friend and collaborator. As an SLP, I realized that theories and principles in gerontology can broaden and also deepen what SLPs do. So one of my goals now that I am a professor is to apply gerontology to my research and teaching in SLP. So now let's talk about the context. Okay, what are we talking about? So the bigger context here is stroke. So a stroke happens when there is a disruption to the blood flow to the brain. Okay, and the stroke usually happen or most commonly happen in older adults. Now, older adults in the US standard is 65 years old and older. It is a leading cause of death, and even though it's not the number one leading cause of death, it's still a leading cause of long-term disability in the US or in many parts of the world. And a stroke often results in aphasia. Aphasia is a communication disorder that affects language comprehension and or production. Usually a stroke happens on the left side of the brain, tend to result in aphasia because for most of us who are right-handed, the left side of the brain tend to be largely in charge of language. So that's the bigger context. Okay, now let's talk about aphasia. What are the social emotional impact of aphasia? Right, there is research, plenty of research showing, people with aphasia experience frustration, embarrassment, feeling that they are inadequate, feeling depressed. After a stroke and living with aphasia, many of them reported having social isolation. Newer research showed that people with aphasia tend to have a smaller and less diverse social network than their peers without aphasia. And we also know that stroke and aphasia have a negative impact on spousal relationships, or when the parent, like an older parent, had a stroke and aphasia, then it negatively affects the relationship that they have with their adult child or adult children. And then many people with aphasia reported that they have lost friends after they had a stroke, and now that they're living with aphasia. So we see that there is research showing the impact, right, of on the social emotional aspect of life by aphasia. Because stroke-induced aphasia often happens in older adults, it is critical to study aphasia and its impact from both disciplines, speech language pathology, or another term, communication science and disorders, and gerontology, which is why I'm here today. And when we talk about socialization in older adulthood, it's important to consider the application of social emotional selectivity theory which I think many of you are probably very familiar with. It's a prominent theory in social gerontology. So it was developed in the 90s by Dr. Carstensen. The idea, the main goal, the main point of this theory is the salience of goals tend to fluctuate throughout the lifespan. Okay? So as we get older, or as we have fewer years to live, right? Older adults tend to have fewer years to live than young adults, right? We tend to want to focus more on maintaining and nurturing important relationships that we already have instead of acquiring, new relationships. But chronological age is not the only factor that influences one's perception of future time. So having a significant health event like a stroke and subsequently aphasia likely influences perception of future time as well. So because stroke most often occurs in older adults, it's reasonable to suggest that older adults with aphasia will experience a shift in their sense of future time, as well as a shift in what relationships they want to focus on. Okay, so we call it relationship priorities. The priorities of different relationships we hypothesize it will change after someone has a stroke and aphasia. And that's part of the ongoing project that we have, that Dr. Brown and I are doing. Because aphasia is a communication disorder that affects language, older adults with aphasia will likely have a difficult time maintaining and nurturing meaningful relationships. So given the world that we live in, it's important for health professionals, such as speech language pathologists or SLP like me, to consider technology, right? And especially communication technology. How communication technology can help older adults with aphasia, help them meet their potentially changing social needs. And when I'm talking about communication technology, I'm talking about technology that we use to exchange ideas and thoughts and feelings, right? So cell phones, social networking sites, right? Facebook, Instagram. I'm talking about emails. Okay, so those are what have been studied in the literature and research. Okay, so aims and methods. Basically, in this specific article or paper that we wrote, we wanted to explore the usage of communication technology among the older population in general, and then also among older adults with aphasia. So it's basically a literature review, and we use Google Scholar and PubMed, and we use these key search terms: older adults, communication technology in combination, and then we use technology and socialization and older adults together, and then we also use like aphasia and like different combination. And we just want to find as many articles as possible. In the following slide, because there's so many research and articles on communication technology among older adults, I will only highlight a trend or trends in this topic, and then I talk about what I found in the literature for older adults with aphasia. Okay, so first we'll talk about communication technology usage among older adults. And maybe this is very common, or you aging experts probably already know a lot about this topic. So communication technology includes like cell phones, social networking sites, emails. Although older adults do not use internet and other communication technology as much as the younger population, there is still a steady increase of usage among older adults in general. Here I give you some resources. Mobile phone usage increase, right? And then internet use increase. It's increased now throughout the years. Right? And then within the older generation, the older population in general, the internet usage varies depending on age, income, and educational background. So research have shown that younger older adults, so those who are considered young, old, like 65 to 69, who are affluent and well educated, are reported to adopt the internet at a higher rate than those who are older and have a lower income and education. So you can see here on the slide of like the different percentage of internet user within each age group, like in decades, not even decades, I'm sorry, like 5 years period, okay? 5-year categories of group. So among older adults who use the internet, most of them use social networking sites and emails. And most of them reported that they use internet for social connectivity more than for information seeking. Now, this finding can be interpreted and appreciated from the socio-emotional selectivity theory, right? In a way, support the theory that as we get older, the salience of connecting socially, maintaining important relationship is higher, increase, than the salience of the goal of like seeking new information or acquiring new relationship. Even though there is a steady increase in communication technology usage among the older population in general, there are still many barriers to technology use among older adults, such as physical and cognitive capabilities, right? We know that there are age-related, like typical age-related changes with vision, with sensory, like with sense of touch, right? Or hearing, so all of that can be a barrier to technology usage. Then educational level and even like access, depending on where people live, do they have access to high-speed internet or not? So those are barriers to technology uses for older adults in general. We're not talking about stroke and aphasia now. So now we're moving to the next group, that is older adults with aphasia. We're talking about communication technology usage for this group of people. So we know that older adults without stroke and aphasia face many challenges in using technology, right? In the previous slide I just talked about. Now older adults with aphasia face even greater barriers due to their language impairments and possibly concomitant cognitive and sensory impairments as a result of the stroke. Excuse me. However, those additional challenges do not necessarily diminish their need to use technology to maintain and nurture important relationships. In fact, from the perspective of the socio-emotional selectivity theory, my co-author and I, Dr. Brown and I, we propose that the need and desire to use technology to maintain relationships may even increase for older adults with aphasia. And that's again, part of a bigger project that is happening ongoing for us, is looking at the tenet of socio-emotional selectivity for older adults with aphasia. So when we talk about aphasia, like within like the discipline of speech language pathology, when we talk about technology, SLPs are very familiar with the alternative and augmentative communication, AAC. It is the most established form of computer technology used in the management of language disorders. It can be used for any age group, and it's been used for people with aphasia. But most of the time it's used for people with severe aphasia, like almost nonverbal, to help them with like basic daily communication. In fact, the role of AAC for people with aphasia is still debated among speech language pathologists. Some people are for it, some people are against it, some people are exploring how do we use it in therapy to help them, but some don't see the benefit of it as much. So in that context, right, in that debate, there's even more limited research on the role of AAC in helping older adults with aphasia to maintain and nurture important relationships. So what I'm trying to say is that we have the literature on AAC, what it does, right, for communication disorder, but we don't know how AAC can help people with aphasia, especially older adults with aphasia, maintain and nurture important relationships. So not in that context of social relationships. So those with mild to moderate aphasia can still use communication technology, like cell phones and emails and social networking sites. And we identify some of the more salient studies that examine communication technology in older adults with aphasia. And these are from Menger and colleagues. They explored internet use among older adults with and without aphasia. And they found that age, like chronological age, is actually a stronger predictor of internet use as compared to the presence of aphasia. However, aphasia is still a negative factor that can impact the usage of email and messaging services. So, it may be harder for older adults with aphasia to use communication technology like emails and text messages because email and text messages rely heavily on language ability. Now, again, aphasia is a language disorder. So they know what they want to say. They know what they want to write, but they have a hard time getting the correct word out. Most of the time, that's the biggest challenge for people with aphasia. So when you type an email, right, that's also use your not only language, but also your ability to type. And many people with aphasia have motor issues. Same thing with text, right? So there are researchers now who found that social media applications that use more pictures, so image-based, like Pinterest, may be easier to use and more beneficial for people with aphasia. But there's also a study on Snapchat, what older adults with aphasia think about Snapchat, and Snapchat did not get a very good feedback. There's a dissatisfaction with that app. We're curious about how Instagram, what older adults with aphasia think about Instagram, but we haven't found any research on this topic yet. Now, keep in mind that the younger generation now, the current young generation now, right? The current young generation, like maybe us, are more tech savvy, right? We are more tech savvy than our parents. So as we get older, we are going to be more tech savvy than the current older adults now. So I think that's why it's really important for more research, right? To explore communication technology and how do we help people with stroke and aphasia, especially older adults. And then another point I want to make is Aphasia Web. So that is right now the only social networking application that was designed specifically for people with aphasia. But at the time of our review, this app was still in the evaluation phase. And I checked it yesterday, and I don't think there's any new research or information that come out that is like good to go. So it's still in the development phase. Okay, so what does it all mean, right? So we see that there is an increasing usage of communication technology for older adults in general. And then we also talk about barriers and opportunities for communication technology usage among older adults with and without aphasia. There are many opportunities, right? And as the technology gets better, and as the population, the aging population is increasing, it's really important that more research is done to explore how communication technology can help older adults, especially older adults with aphasia, with stroke and aphasia, maintain important relationships in their life. So we need more research. So that's it. Thank you so much for listening to my talk. Bye.